Today we are going to review loss as it relates to the 7 core issues within adoption and permanency. Before we get started, I'm going to do a quick introduction of myself. My name is Darcy Solom. I'm the post-adopt coordinator for the right upper quadrant of North Dakota. I'm based out of Grand Forks. I live with my husband and my puppy Kona. My husband and I recently became foster care licensed, so we are having fun with the youth we've had been able to spend some time with. We've been getting outside to enjoy some walks with this nice weather. We also enjoy putzing in our garden and finding the best parks within Grand Forks. One of my favorite parts of getting to know families that I work with is learning the strengths of each member of the families and seeing how each member plays a vital role within that family unit. The webinar will be recorded and posted on our website. You're more than welcome to go back and listen if you wish, or share it with another family who you know might benefit from learning about loss as it relates to their adoption journey. If you do have any hesitation about being on tonight and having the webinar posted on our website, please let me know. I'm more than willing to record the content another time. On the agenda, there will be a quick intro to the book, the 7 core issues in adoption and permanency, the basics to loss of triad members within adoption and permanency. The triad members include the adoptee, the adoptive parents, and the birth parents. Each member of the triad are important members within each single adoption. There will also be a glimpse of the 3 types of losses found within adoption and permanency. After that, we'll take some time to look at additional losses that each member within an adoption may experience, what loss may look like, and then we'll also take some time to talk about support for each member who has been impacted by this loss. My fellow coordinators at North Dakota Post Adopt are taking time to study the 7 core issues within adoption and permanency. Within each webinar or seminar, our hope is to provide a bit of education regarding the specific core issue, as well as look at tools to use to address each issue. These topics that we will be sharing may seem a bit heavy, so if you need to take a moment, feel free to do so. The core issues within adoption and permanency are experienced by all members of the youth's family, both the adopted and the biological families. We as a society often see adoption as a great and joyous event that needs to be celebrated and that people benefit from. We often also see that adoption affects primarily one generation, but does indeed affect multiple generations and multiple people in the adoptee's life: birth parents, maternal and paternal grandparents, adoptive parents, and so on and so forth. I do think that adoption and permanency is great, and it should be celebrated, but along with that, it's important to recognize that within the joys found in adoption and permanency, there are also some heavy topics that we need to address and that need to be normalized as well. Excuse me. In the 1980s, Deborah Silverstein and Sharon Kaplan Roja researched various topics relating to adoption and permanency. They began reading books and interviewing people involved within the adoption and guardianship realm. These 2 researchers came to find that those affected by adoption, whether it be the adoptee, the adoptive parent, or the birth parent, all experienced 7 different emotions or tasks. Their findings can be summed up within the following core issues: loss or rejection, shame, guilt, identity, intimacy, and finally mastery and control. Through learning more about the 7 core issues within adoption and permanency, you may find that each of the core issues are intertwined and that loss is the very first of the core issues, which lead to the next one, and so on and so forth. The original findings focused on the adoption community itself. The authors of this book, Roja and Allison Maxon Davis, saw the effects of the adoption into larger communities as family building options have expanded. So basically, that means that the authors took what they learned from the original findings and applied it to many forms of parenting that we see throughout the U.S. The point of the findings from this research is to help bring an understanding to the lifelong issues that arise not only in our youth who are achieving permanency, but also for the families involved with the youth, both birth families and adoptive and guardianship and permanency families. You'll hear me reference each specific group throughout our time tonight. Each member has been impacted by loss to some degree. As I just mentioned, the first core issue within the 7 core issues that triggers the remaining 6 issues is loss. All adoption, kinship, and guardianship families are created out of loss. It's important to note that loss affects all members of adoption. It affects the child, the birth family, and the adopted family. Loss is intertwined throughout all members of both families. It's important to note that this major loss, the loss of a birth family, also changes the trajectory of the youth's life. The understanding of loss will be processed at different developmental stages of the youth's life and will need to be adequately addressed to help the youth understand in a manner that both are age appropriate and developmentally appropriate for that individual child. Parents, both birth and adoptive, may also experience loss and its effects at various points within their life as well. It's equally important for parents to recognize and to work through these losses in a healthy manner. Loss can be both concrete and abstract for all members impacted by adoption. Concrete losses are the physical losses in a person's experiences. For example, concrete losses for youth include the loss of a birth family, the loss of their belongings, the loss of their relationships, and the loss of their role within a family unit. If a child is in a sibling set but adopted as a single child, it's evident the loss of relationships and roles are more apparent. The loss of a child and potentially the loss of seeing their child meet many milestones are examples of concrete losses for birth parents. Abstract losses include the losses that we don't necessarily see, but are very much so impacted by. This includes the loss of the fantasy of what the youth thought their birth family was, and even fantasized reasons as to why the youth thought they were being adopted. Birth parents may fantasize about what their child is like, how they're doing, and what they're interested in. Adoptive parents may fantasize about what their child may be like if they weren't exposed to trauma. These losses can be triggered by a picture, an event, a question, a nightmare, a season, a scent, touch, and even a sound. It's important to be cognizant of when behaviors seem to be off, as this can help determine what may have triggered the child, and in return, parents can be proactive within meeting the youth's needs. The impact of this loss of a birth family cannot be understood at the time of the loss originally occurs. This loss may affect the person's individual developmental stages, as well as the family unit's development over time. There are 3 types of loss that we'll review today, which includes ambiguous loss, vicarious loss, and secondary loss. These losses fall under concrete and abstract losses, like we just talked about, but each loss goes a little bit more in detail about what members may feel. Each of these losses are also important to be mindful of, as it not only affects the youth, but also affects the members of the adoption triad as well. For the purposes of tonight, I'll focus primarily on the adoptee, the adoptive family, and the birth family. So we'll start off with ambiguous loss. Ambiguous loss is within the adoption is a feeling of grief or distress combined with confusion about the lost person or relationship. There's no closure about the loss that has occurred, whether it be for the birth family, the adoptive family, or the adoptee. Parents may logically understand why the youth is adoptive, but may have questions or wonders that haven't been resolved and may never be resolved. For birth parents, there's the obvious concrete loss of their child. Tied into the concrete loss are the abstract or the ambiguous losses that are held with unanswered questions. Birth parents may often wonder, is my child alive? Are they safe? Are they healthy? Are they doing well in school? The birth parent may wonder where their child even resides. There's also loss of parenting roles that can affect the birth parent deeply, But it's important to know that these are often not even addressed or talked about. For adoptive parents, there's a loss of the unknowns for their adoptive children. For example, adoptive parents may wonder what their child would have been like if they hadn't been exposed to various experiences in utero or even over the early years of their life. Some adoptive parents may mourn the loss of opportunity to protect their child from trauma. Some adoptive parents may also struggle with infertility, and this can create various longings, such as a dream to bear their own child and have a genetic connection between them and a youth. For our adoptive and guardianship youth, ambiguous loss stems from the initial loss of their first family. There may be a fantasy narrative the youth creates about their birth family, their culture, their first home environment. The youth may be searching the environments they encounter on a daily basis, such as at the grocery store, the swimming pool, the playground, to find answers to help solidify the fantasies that they've created to help make their life story make more sense to them. For adoptees and guardianship youth, the loss of the first family can be difficult as there is no type of set closure, such as a memorial or a ritual, to honor the losses that they have experienced. Ambiguous loss can postpone the grieving process, as there are unanswered questions. There's a continuous longing for the unknowns. Next, we'll jump over to talk a little bit about vicarious loss. Vicarious losses are traumatic memories and experiences that are embedded into one's senses and are outside the explicit or conscious memory. This causes a person to be re-triggered easily when they're feeling distressed. Vicarious loss can be better understood by the adoptive family working on creating a welcoming home and are trying to attach to their child. There's a lot of time and energy that parents, adoptive or permanency parents, put into creating a welcoming place for their adoptive or youth seeking permanency. However, the child may be easily triggered by some sort of memory. For the purpose of tonight, we'll say that the child is triggered by a sensory memory, a smell, a sight, or a feeling of something that reminds them of an event that happened prior to coming into the permanency home. This child may become dysregulated, leading to a behavior from the triggering sensory memory. This behavior may be seen through screaming or aggression, hoarding, lying, lack of sleep, etc., because of the uncertainty of how to manage these sensory memories. The family tries to understand and work through these behaviors that are seen, but appears to catch the dysregulation of the youth. Parents may act in a way they typically wouldn't if they weren't from being in a dysregulated state themselves. Parents may find themselves yelling, punishing, rejecting, or even isolating. This dysregulation can be felt amongst all family members, creating a home environment that is stressful for everyone. This environment where adoptive families find themselves is also known as vicarious trauma. Vicarious loss and vicarious trauma are interlinked, as these losses that a youth may have led to dysregulation within themselves that leads to adoptive family being dysregulated. It's important to note that this dysregulation found in parents at the point to responding in a nature they probably wouldn't if they weren't trying to meet the need of their adopted youth. Parents may also find themselves carrying losses that aren't in the forefront of their mind. These losses may include previous traumas, such as having unhealthy parents or experienced abuse, neglect, or abandonment from their early years. It's important for parents to be cognizant of their losses from earlier in life, as parents may be easily triggered when trying to parent youth. Birth families can carry vicarious loss within their own life as well. For example, if a birth family lost a child to adoption and conceive and parent another child, the parents may find themselves triggered and emotionally reactive. These parents may act towards their second child in various ways, which include being overprotective or rejecting or even punishing the child in ways they might not warrant. These actions may stem from unresolved emotions from the loss of their first child. Secondary losses occur in a person's day-to-day life when memories of a traumatic loss is brought to their attention. Secondary losses stem from the original core losses all members have when adoption happens. Birth parents may experience secondary losses when they may wish they had their own children on holidays, such as Mother's Day or Father's Day, or when they see or hear a child that reminds them of their child who was adopted. I would even venture to say that adoptive parents may feel some sort of similar feelings as birth parents do, in a sense, with these holidays. Perhaps there's an expectation of how Mother's Day or Father's Day should be celebrated. There may be a loss for adoptive parents when there isn't a gushing love or a sense of being thanked personally by a child for being a parent or a social media post of similar nature. Adopted parents may feel a sense of loss when they hope or expect a relationship with their adopted child to be a certain way, but it isn't. This can be triggered by seeing these hopes, desires, and expectations between other parents and their children. Youth who are adopted may experience secondary trauma often. For example, when they are asked why they were adopted or experience sensory items like scents that remind them of their first home, they may be reminded of the traumatic event of losing their first family, their first home. Children may experience secondary loss when they need to write about their family, bring a family photo in, or work on a family tree for a school project. Now we are going to discuss various losses that each member within adoption may experience. Each of these losses may fall under any of the losses we just addressed, but it's important to discuss further what some of these losses can look like for individuals impacted by the adoption of a youth. It might be easy to define whose loss is more than the loss of another. Instead of ignoring the losses of members such as birth family or perhaps adoptive families, it's imperative to acknowledge and normalize the losses for all who have been affected. I'll talk about some of the losses that are experienced by all members. Know that some losses may affect one particular member, while other losses may affect all members associated with an adoption. There is a loss of a family member. For birth families, this loss of a birth member is someone's child, someone's niece, nephew, or grandchild. There may be loss of a role. If adopting out of birth order, a child in your home may lose the role of being the oldest child, or the child adopted may lose the role of being the oldest or the youngest. The loss of the position the child had. With this, I think of a parentified adopted child. Although we want our children to be children, it's also important to remember the loss of this role is important to the youth. A birth parent may lose their role of being a parent. A person who was once a grandparent is now a parent, and this new role of primary caregiver can have various difficulties. Time is also lost. Energy is spent on addressing any item that comes up for your child, and time may be lost in what you are hoping to use for whatever it may be. Time with a grandchild, a child, a niece is potentially lost. Time with birth family is lost for the youth. An opportunity to be seen as the person they are. Birth parents may be seen in a different light than what they are due to the stigma that media and culture have put on them. Adoptive parents may be seen as infertile or needy, or even as saints for taking on children in rough circumstances. Adoptive children may be seen as lucky to be adopted or ungrateful for being adopted and given a different life trajectory. This can be a discussion for another day, but this can be very hard for an adoptee. Dreams of a life that they hope for may be lost. Adoptive and birth parents may have hoped, dreamed for a certain life. These ideas may not pan out the way that they were once dreamed of. Adoptees may have dreamt for a reality that they lost as well. Internal power may be lost. Youth don't always have a choice with who they move in with, who adopts them, or even to be removed from the birth family, leaving the adoptee to feel like they have no say, no power over circumstances that can have such a huge impact on them. Privacy may also have been lost. Both sets of parents, as well as the adopted youth, may feel that this loss of privacy. Home studies are done, documents are generated, family histories, medical records, birth parent records, school records are passed from one person to the next. This can feel intrusive for all members involved in the adoption process. There may also be a loss of medical, educational, and other important records. A loss of medical records, or even knowing that a family history of medical needs may be lost, which can be difficult for medical attention not only in the youth right here and now, but also that can affect the youth as an adult. So we'll start off with birth family loss. We touched briefly on the losses a birth family may experience up to this point, but there's a little bit more that I want to touch on. Birth families might miss the various stages of seeing their youth grow, seeing the youth take their first steps, start school, become a teenager, learn to drive. Birth family might feel the effects of loss of becoming the family they desired, the smells and sounds of their child. Birth families may lose their role as being parents. They are still a mother and a father despite the fact that the child is with them. Birth families may lose their status as the negative connotations on the birth family with having an adopted child. Birth parents may lose access to their emotions and their ability to manage them effectively. Birth families may lose their self-esteem as they question what kind of parent gives up their child for adoption or loses a child due to an unmet need. Birth parents may lose their ability to raise their children together. Adoptive families may experience specific losses as well. Adoptive parents may lose a sense of self-confidence. Adoptive parents may have successfully parented or are currently successfully parenting their biological children. When adding an adoptive youth into their home, they may feel that there's a sense of dysregulation, and then they'll have senses of failure due to not feeling prepared to parent a youth with trauma. Adoptive parents may also feel a sense of loss involving a life trajectory for their children. Parents may have hopes and dreams for their children, but also feel like they have lost time and that these events to happen prior to youth coming into their home may have put a wrench in their hopes and dreams for the child. Adoptive parents may lose the dream they've envisioned for their family to be. Adoptive families may lose a sense of joy as they learn about events their youth endured prior to coming into their home, as well as the losses their youth had. Adoptive families may also have a sense of loss about the hoped connection to their youth birth family. Adoptive families may lose friendships for a variety of reasons, including differences of family makeup, differences in a need of a variety of parenting styles, etc. Parents may not have the ability to name a child, which can lead to a loss of parenting. As we've hit on this throughout our time, we'll touch a little bit more on the losses for the youth. Society may view the youth as a chosen child. This may create expectations for a fairy tale life and potentially various senses of loss for the youth. This mindset enables a youth to feel they're expected to live up to some sort of ideal person. This sets the child up for potential difficulties for attachment with their youth. It may also lead to a youth to feelings of unhappiness if they're not able to live up to the expectation that they might think the family or society has for them. Adoptees might hear that they were a gift, born from the heart, saved, rescued, and that they were traded up. These words can play into the fantasized world of adoption and completely disregard the loss that accompanies their adoption or permanency plan. Now we'll go into a few different ways that a youth in permanency or adoption are also impacted. There's the late discovery adoptee. Some adoptees who discover later in life that they were adopted may feel a sense of relief that they're not like their birth family. Other adoptees may feel a sense of confusion, anger, senses of betrayal that they weren't told the truth. Adoptees may wonder who knows their story and reframe all of their relationships based on the findings of being adopted. These youth will spend a lot of time and energy rebuilding their identity. The losses involved with a late discovery of being adopted could be avoided if the truth and honesty were there from the beginning. Adoptees in search and reunion. Adoptees may desire to search for and reunify with their birth family. Note that with reunify, I mean to have a relationship with the birth family. It would not be possible to reunify in the sense that the youth would now be living with their birth family. Adoptees may create a story about their birth family, who they are, what they look like, what they do, etc. This is a normal aspect for all adoptees as they're trying to fill in the blanks about their birth family. However, when adoptees do search and reunify with their birth family, there may be a sense of loss because the birth family might not be like the story the adoptee has fantasized about. When reconnecting with birth family, the youth may be confronted with a sense of rejection from the birth family, that some birth family has passed away, or that there is information about the birth family the youth wasn't prepared for, leading to additional layers of loss. It's important to recognize and put a name to all the loss that is involved with for all family members that have been impacted by adoption. Of course, each member may have differences in the loss that pertains specifically to them, but it's important to recognize that each member does have unique losses and that there are commonalities as well. Recognizing and naming these losses, working through these losses, allows to reduce isolation of walking through these losses alone, but helps normalize these losses and the reactions that may be present. Loss can lead to many different subtle and not so subtle ways. There are some signs and symptoms to look out for when relating to youth. A child may commonly experience difficulty with changes or transitions, even seemingly minor changes and transitions. An example includes transitions from one activity to the next, or going from school through the week to the weekends to being at home, and even transition from school to winter into summer breaks. There may be difficulty with making decisions, psychic paralysis, or even the feeling of being overwhelmed when asked to make a choice. This can be seen when a youth is freezing, or being outwardly exhausted and dysregulated when presented with a decision, whether it be a big or a small decision. There may be problems with coping with routine childhood and adolescent losses, such as the death of a pet or moving into a new home. As you can assume, a youth may demonstrate dysregulation that doesn't match the loss that they've experienced. A sort of learned helplessness and hopelessness due to the sense that he has no control over his life. There may be depression, anxiety, and there may be feelings of guilt. Parents, both adoptive and birth, may portray symptoms of loss as well. The way in which the parent portrays loss can be very similar to how a youth portrays their loss. Parents may struggle with guilt, depression, anxiety, the paralysis around making a decision, and difficulty with coping with a loss. There are practices and tools that parents can use and that they can teach their children to help address the losses involved relating to adoption. For parents, it's important to be cognizant of all the losses that has been experienced up until this point and where these losses stem from, and the losses that are held on to that you're unaware of. It's important for parents to offer themselves grace, attend therapy if needed, having a neutral, safe person to process items relating to stressors of parenting, loss that is experienced, and etc., can make a world of a difference. It's important for parents to allow themselves to take information in through their senses, wearing cologne or perfume that are enjoyed, going for a walk barefoot outside, listening to the birds singing during the day and the crickets at night. Another way is to eat foods that are enjoyed. These simple acts can help alleviate some of the stressors parents may experience. It's also important to take time for themselves, eat healthy, take time to exercise, offer grace when you make a mistake, and respond differently next time. Allow for forgiveness for yourself and for others who you hold a grievance against. Just like you can do this for yourself, there are actions that you can take to assist your child with losses that they have. It's important to help give a voice to the losses that the child has experienced, acknowledge and validate the youth's feelings of loss. It's important to show that you as a parent understand and can sympathize with them. It's important to help redefine what creates a family. Our families may continue to change over time. They may grow, and in some circumstances, some family members may leave, and the families may become smaller. It's important to continue to have conversations about what family is, what it means, as your child may need to address this throughout various stages, and as a family dynamics change. It's important to be open to what your child has to say, as the child may have a great broader view of what family is. It's an interesting quote. Boss says, acting as if the membership list of an adoptive family is etched in stone may be, in the end, more stressful than explicitly recognizing that this family has some ambiguous boundaries. It's important to give child permission to grieve the losses of his birth family without guilt. Suggest times and places where your child is welcome to express his grief and ways in which he can grieve. Allow for times to talk, journal, draw, or vent feelings through exercises are just a few options. Creating a loss box may also be important. A loss box is any type of box the youth can decorate. The youth can then put items that represent different losses they have. This loss box allows the youth to create and partake in a ritual that acknowledges their losses. It's important to include birth family and other birth parents and other birth family members in pictorial representations on the adoptive tree. One option would be to depict an orchard where trees grow along beside each other. The birth family, former foster families, or other significant people in the child's life can be other trees found in the same family orchard. It can be beneficial to be conscientious of how certain events may trigger feelings of loss. These events may include holidays, birthdays, adoption days, etc. Something that can be done the parents can alter or add family rituals to respect the child's feelings. On birthdays, for example, you could add an extra candle on the cake to remember the birth family of the youth. It's important to keep expectations reasonable. A child may need to grieve their losses continuously and know that they can never be fully cured, fixed, or resolved in a predetermined time frame. Let the child know that their feelings related to these losses will come and go at different times in their life. Help the youth find a safe person with whom they can express those feelings associated with their loss. It's important for parents to model normal, healthy responses to loss. If you or your partner suffers loss, share these feelings openly. Let the children see that you mourn so they can learn how to express sadness or anger about loss appropriately. It's equally important for boys to see that grown men can cry as well, and that it is okay to do. It's important to utilize a therapist if needed for the particular child. It's important to ensure that this therapist is adoption competent, as these therapists have a bit more training involving the complexities that arise with an adoption. These therapists may be able to meet the need of your child better because they've been trained with special trainings. And then it's important to know that grief will be talked about in a later session, but it's important to know that grief has multiple stages. A person doesn't necessarily go step by step through grief. Um, they may be angry, they may deny, they may bargain, and they may flip through at different points of time, and that's normal and that's okay. But it's important to just be there with your child and for your child as they continuously grieve the losses that they've had. So recognizing loss has benefits for all family members within the adoption of a youth. Creating a place within your family and a dialogue creates a safe place for youth to talk about their loss. Healing begins when losses are recognized. Loss can be hard, no matter the loss or who experiences the loss. It's important for parents to take care of themselves, acknowledge and allow um, themselves to grieve the losses that are held. Know that you can make a huge difference in supporting your youth's life through the journey of acknowledging and working through the losses that they've experienced as well, and continue to process.